Welcome to UC San Diego Music's live stream of Music 33, Introduction to Composition 3's end-of-term presentation. Please note that for today's presentation, the 9 undergraduate composers will present original compositions from audio files collected by Peter Sloan from the Whale Acoustic Lab at Scripps Oceanography Research Institute. Each composer will introduce their piece via Zoom or a pre-recorded video. Next, we'll listen to each track of original composition. Then the jury panel will give feedback, live via Zoom. This is the traditional format in order for this type of presentation, albeit remote in this incarnation. Please note that the composers and jurors will be switching back and forth between Zoom and listening to the compositions via this YouTube stream. So we request your patience as we deal with the latency between the live presentation and the YouTube live stream. Our chat box will be open on YouTube the entire time, and the composers will be monitoring the feed. So you are welcome to type in questions. Also, as a courtesy to the artist and your fellow audience members, wherever you are, please take this opportunity to silence all mobile devices. Please take this time to look around you and locate the nearest exit. The nearest exit might not be the door from which you entered your home. Thank you, and enjoy the presentation.
Welcome to our concert. This is a recital of Music 33C, Introduction to Composition 3. Thank you for joining us today afternoon. And for some people, I know some people are connecting from Europe. So thanks for staying awake at 12 a.m. at night. So my name is Anahita Asi. I was the instructor of this course this past quarter. And I just wanted to tell a little bit about what the course is and what we have done. And yes, so normally, if COVID-19 wouldn't have happened, this class, the students would have been writing pieces for ensembles, a bit like bigger ensembles. And then COVID-19 happened, and had to come up with new ways to see how can we make still a meaningful composition class, and also at the end of the quarter do something that students still like enjoy going through to hear their creations and also share that with other people. So the whole plan changed, and then what we worked on was basically the main part of the piece was about what is listening and how as composers, we need to be able to listen. Listening is the most important skill for every musician, but also for composers. So students had to they were every day writing journals of deep listening, every day different pieces, and writing down in sketches and in writings or in the way that they were hearing the sounds. And they worked on different projects throughout the quarter, and things that they've never actually ever tried before. And I just want to say thank you guys. You guys accepted this challenge, do the things that you've never done before. And every class you came motivated and engaged, and every time you gave me more energy to be prepared for the next class and have so much passion to be together those hours every week. Yes, so today the result of the past 3 weeks of the work of students, we're gonna hear them today. So they took, I provided them with the audio files that my dear friend Peter Sloan and Josh Jones, they collected from the Whale Acoustic Lab in Scripps Oceanography Institute, which are the recordings of under the water, deep ocean, the ocean and ice sounds, different kinds of mammals. So the students had to go through these recordings and then make their own compositions with this audio files. I think that's it. Yes. I hope you enjoy our concert. I just wanted to say thank you, Matt, for this amazing, beautiful introduction. Thanks, Jessica and Sherry, for making everything happen. Well, enjoy.
Hello, everyone. My name is Charles Schultz, and thank you for coming to this concert. Thank you for listening to my piece. My piece is titled Echo Gestations, and it's kind of about that. It's about um, developing like and putting form to echoes. And at first, I had this idea because I was listening to a lot of ice tracks, and there seems to be a lot of like repetitions of the same sound, but occasionally with like transpositions, it almost sounded like. So I thought that was really cool and almost like a canon. This is, of course, over the span of listening to all the recordings. And so I decided to venture on that. And I took a few recordings of ice, especially recordings where like it sounded like the ice was breaking, and a lot of different sounds or like voices were being created from that like breaking and hissing sound, and they kind of sounded like they were weaving together. So I used different compilations of those recordings, and then I repeated them with different alterations to the musical parameters like dynamics and acoustic layout, and also like pitch and speed. And I hoped to develop it and kind of create a transformation from two of the basic ice sounds that I really enjoyed, which were at first a long, continuous vocal choral sound, and then eventually drastically interrupted by like a type of puffy explosion when the ice does break. And then after such an explosion, the piece is kind of taken over by more of like a lot more canonical and like interspersed sighs and wailings. So thank you and enjoy.
So, thank you, Charles. Thanks. So, I forgot to introduce my dear friends and colleagues, the amazing jurors today. So, we have this tradition that we invite other graduate students to listen and like give their feedbacks. So, today I'm very happy that these amazing people could come here. So, we have Celeste, Alexandria, Nakul, and Alex. So welcome. Yeah, who wants to start? Okay, Alex.
Charles, congratulations. It's really great seeing your work in this totally different medium. Charles and I are actually working together this year or this quarter in the CAT writing program. So it's really great to get to hear your music. I think this piece is really successful. I really appreciate your attentiveness and kind of daring attitude to dynamics, to energy, to tactility. I think that's one of the advantages that working with a purely electronic medium can offer you. You're not hindered by all of the trappings of kind of conventional notation and all of the associations that a lot of us have with it. And I think you really seized on those opportunities. I appreciate especially the moments about 2/3 of the way through, something like that, where I started to sense you really playing with layering, which I thought was really, really smart, right? You had opportunities that you seized where you can have activity continuing in one layer while something else in another layer very, very suddenly and very drastically changes. And I think that's really effective and very dramatic. My one question to you would be to maybe have a kind of thought process of sort of what if with regard to time and proportion. And I wonder, for example, if those first couple of like tableaux, the first couple of chunks of sound at the beginning of the piece could have been maybe much longer to sort of acclimate our ears to these like very basic, very primordial, sound elements that you're going to then be working with and developing in a much more complex and mercurial way later. Not to say that it's incorrect or correct to have it one way or another, but I just wonder if going through a kind of questioning process of what if, I like to call it, might have been productive there. But again, really congratulations, and I think it comes off really, really well.
Celeste.
Hi, hello, hi Charles. Can folks hear me okay? Yes, good. It was really it's a beautiful connection that you've been working with Alex in the CAT writing program, because I was so struck in your introduction by the beautiful language that you were using to describe your explorations in this piece, and I wrote some things down because it was so great about these sighs and wails and then a puffy explosion, and as soon as the poof happened I was like, oh, that's the poof. So thank you for that really inviting and generous introduction to all of us. Like, you really kind of opened a door that we could enter your piece through. And as soon as the piece began, I could hear the voices that you had kind of queued up for us, or primed us to expect. And my experience of the piece, I loved it. And I could hear you listening to these sounds as if they were voices. And I don't know whether this was what you were thinking, but I could hear your anthropomorphizing of those voices, and the moments that I found the most imaginatively vivid was where it sounded like you were kind of singling out individual voices and like giving them a little mini life, like a little mini story, hearing a voice enter and develop in some way, establish a kind of personality, and then sort of melt, as it were. And so that kind of choral effect I really, really loved. And to my mind, it seemed like, at least this is how I was listening to it. And I really love how Anahita kind of established this whole exercise as one of listening. So it seems like in terms of my feedback, like maybe the best thing I can offer you is just like my experience of listening to your piece. Sort of the first like half roughly, well, before the puff, everything before the puff, I was kind of hearing as very organic, like these voices that would sort of sing for a while and then fade away. And then there was this amazing moment of silence before the explosion. And I would have taken a few more seconds of silence if you had given them to me. I wouldn't have complained. I mean, I thought it was great as it was, but just if you ever have a moment in your future where you feel like making bold choices, I think you can go for it. And then it seemed like after the explosion, I could sort of hear your hand, as it were, as like the ice sculptor, and the organization of sounds kind of felt different, right? It was you making structural decisions as opposed to you being led by the sounds. And that was a really interesting contrast, which I enjoyed experiencing both ends of those things. Last comment, just something that occurred to me. While of course the focus of this class, understandably and rightfully so, hasn't been so much on like electronic music production, which is kind of its own field of expertise and can of worms. I wonder if it could have been fun, I was listening through these headphones, right? And I wonder if it could have been fun to explore a little bit with panning, which is actually a very kind of tactile, like low entry threshold thing to start playing around with. Because it seems like, again, the vocal quality of like giving these voices sort of little stories and little journeys, set spatially in terms of like moving from left to right, could have been interesting. It could have been something to play with. But yeah, that's all from me. Thank you, Charles. That was a really beautiful experience.
Alexandria.
Hi, Charles. Before I go into my little spiel, I have a question for you. So were all the samples ice samples completely? Very cool. So I love that you took this materiality of ice and that you brought all of these different dimensions to it, because we think of ice as these big glaciers we see like on National Geographic or something, or like ice in the refrigerator, like these different characters of ice. But I feel like you really brought me into that world, which was very cool. And I love that you kind of let the ice speak for itself, which was interesting. It seemed like there was pretty minimal processing from what I can hear on the YouTube connection. But I thought that actually, with the not using so much processing, I thought how you worked with the samples were pretty brilliant, because I think that you bring a lot of dimensionality to the audio. You meticulously chose when the sound would be more forward and back. It didn't seem like you used compression. You may have, but right. So I thought that was really brilliant with your decision making, and I think that and I love Celeste's suggestion of panning. I think that would make it more effective. But I love that you panned kind of forward and out from the center. Do you understand what I'm saying by that? Like sometimes they call it like 3D audio, or sometimes they call it like different things, and they have different processing techniques. But when your sound sample, like obviously it was more close mic'd in some areas and mic'd a little bit further away in some areas, it gives the feeling of distance without having to process it. And so I like how you chose and where you decided to do that. I thought that was very cool. I think like my biggest critique would be there's that end where the sound got very low. It sounded like you either pitch shifted it or used, like, I guess it was just a low sound or in general. I feel like I could have used more of that. I feel like sometimes, especially when the transition is kind of radical, because it's a lot of more high-pitched material in the beginning, like the temptation is to kind of like move through it quickly. But I actually think, because you're like, oh, is this just like boring or something? Like, is it just too repeated? I think you could actually hold on to that and let us go into that texture in a different way. I don't know, like I love how you you really explored a material. Just to wrap it up, I love that you explored the material being ice, a material that's kind of like very cold but also very warm, and like that has a lot of different colors to it and different uses in the environment. So I thought that was a very cool way of speaking through that voice through sound, if that makes any sense.
Anyone have any question? You can also comment each other. You're good? No questions? Okay. Then let's move on. Thank you. Congratulations, Charles.
Hello, my name is Sebastian Clark, and I composed this next piece, Half the Time, or 4 minutes and 23 seconds. It is my meditation on the ongoing Black Lives Matter movement, which has reached a fever pitch nationally and internationally after George Floyd's murder this past Memorial Day. In the piece, there are a few threads that interweave, and they are everyday chit-chat, gun violence, anguish, politics, and the rotating machinery of a society we're all trapped in. I used the cracking of ice for gunshots and many beluga whale sounds for chatter and seemingly benevolent phases, or normalcy. The sound of wind howling was manipulated for anguish and for police and ambulance sirens. Even the political iconography of a donkey, in the form of a donkey's hee-haw, makes an appearance. The Black Lives Matter movement was slow in development, but upon persistent highlighting of injustice, it has grown, and I use that as my guide to how this piece develops, in repetition, finally reaching a climax, yet ominously returning once more to the machinery of society, posing the question of whether or not the status quo is acceptable anymore. The piece is so named because George Floyd's neck was knelt upon for 8 minutes and 46 seconds. So for all the cacophony in the piece, it is merely half the time, or 4 minutes and 23 seconds.
Okay. So, Nicole.
This piece is anything but silent. I really loved it. I love the connotation to silence, because as a culture we've been silent, and it just puts a whole new spin on this piece. And the noisiness that you incorporate is a really interesting metaphor. And I've never contemplated this sort of idea in this manner before. And I'm also a big fan of using music as a manner of protest. So I think that hats off to you, and it's a really powerful piece. And I really like the sound design. And I wouldn't, had you not explained to me that this is how you created the sounds, I wouldn't have necessarily known that you had created these sounds in this manner. So I think you did a lot of creative stuff with the sound design. I guess one comment I would make regarding that is some of the screams sounded really panned to one side. I wonder if the possibility of some dynamic panning where you kind of move it through the stereo field a little bit. You may have done a little bit of that at times, but sometimes it just sounded super hard panned. But I love the intensity that you brought to it. Every time it's like anything but silence, because anytime I thought it had reached its intensity point, it just intensified that much more. And the hee-haws over the intense machine gun shots and the howling, it's really, really powerful. It's really amazing, and the anguish really does sound anguish. So I'm moved, man. It's really, really good work.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Did you see that? Alex?
Well, I really want to commend you for reflecting on ways and taking this project as an opportunity to reflect on ways that society, social political concerns can enter into and be in dialogue with musical practice, right? There's this still pervasive idea, basically, that got started primarily in the 19th century, that somehow music and art, maybe in general, is somehow divorced from politics, somehow divorced from things that are happening in the world at large. And that's not true. And I really, so I think it's great that you're thinking about ways in which there's room for a dialogue there. I want to pick up on Nicole's comment about maybe not, he wouldn't necessarily have known the origin of the sounds if you hadn't told us. And so I guess my question to you would be, what does that mean, right? What does the fact that these are, sounds of ice, the sounds from nature that are being, placed in a certain context to sound like something else? What does that mean? And what's at stake in doing that, and what's being communicated in doing that? I think it's a really interesting subject, and I think there could be a lot of interesting and really rich ideas and perhaps further projects coming out of answers to those questions. I'll just say one more thing, which is that in your introduction, you sort of implied that, and I guess your title in a way implies this too, that one of your goals is to make us reflect on just how long 8 minutes and 46 seconds is, right? Because this feels like the way you framed it was, this feels like a long piece. It feels overwhelming, but it's only 4 minutes and 23 seconds. It's only half that amount of time. But to me, actually, the piece generally proceeds in a quite, of course there are interruptions, but actually to my ears, there's quite a lot of smooth progression to the piece. And so actually I didn't feel like the piece it didn't feel perceptually that long to me. And so I just wonder if that is one of your goals, to sort of play with how long does 4 minutes and 23 seconds feel, if exploring some other formal possibilities might be effective. But again, congratulations for taking this on, and I totally echo Nicole's comments that your sensitivity to the sounds and designing them is really strong.
Thank you.
Alexandria. And yes, before I was like, guys, if you want to talk with the juries, you can like answer them if you want to like have a conversation with them. That it's not only like one way street. Alexandria.
Awesome work. I thought it was, I mean, I'm going to echo Alex and Nicole, the fact that you took this concert and this opportunity and you reflected while making music of the things that are happening and the overt racism that has been happening forever. I think is really powerful. David Borgo was telling me that there's someone that was interviewed on the radio the other day, because we talk about things going in tides, but tides kind of come in and they go out. But actually, this is an entire ocean. It never went away. It just keeps on getting, and it just keeps on happening. And I don't know if that makes any sense, but it reminded me of that analogy. But I love how you chose these extreme highs in the beginning, and it was in very loud volumes, like almost on like I had to turn it down. I was like, okay, here we go. And I thought that was a really powerful impact. And when you have, and it was very bold that you had that kind of high pitch going for quite a while. And then it made that impact from when you went into the end so much more powerful. And I love this idea that you're kind of playing with silence, of course, playing with the title of the cage piece, but also silence in general, because when you have a sound that kind of repeats and kind of sustains like that, it almost, even though there is obviously sound and vibration, it also could be considered silence until the next thing comes in, or like the next activity comes in. So I thought that was really smart. That reminded me of the silence and listening to Noise and Silence by Salome Vogelin. I don't know if you want to do any sort of reading, but kind of provokes ideas of sound art to me. My favorite part was actually the ending. I think someone wrote that in the comments that was pretty badass, and it was. And I loved how you, like, all of a sudden, like after this collage and this sound design, you go to this very rhythmic space, and it gets pretty clear, like it has a time, and then it kind of comes from being very wide stereo to coming in and 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 coming in, and it stops. So that was very moved by that. And when it ended, I was like, oh my gosh, I had to take a deep breath for a second. So I don't know, it's just a very powerful affect and very powerful reflection. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So, Seb, there is a question from the people who are watching in the audience for you. Do you see the chat? So the question is, I would be interested to hear about how Sebastian considered the tactile aspects of the sound material. The visceral nature of the sounds really reinforced the weight of the subject matter for me. And you're on mute if you do not know that. Seb, you're still on mute.
Sorry about that. The tactile aspects. Well, I mean, the tactile is what informed the machinery, is what informed the gunshots. Every time through the ice recordings, it wasn't clear what was happening out in nature or whether or not it was the equipment interacting with nature. But I chose not to play favorites on that aspect. So if the mic was getting touched, that was fair game for me.
Awesome. I think I forgot to mention two things that it would be great if everyone can listen with headphones, because there are some of the pieces that they are with binaural recording, and then you can hear everything. And also there are lots of fine sounds, so if you're listening with headphones, you will be hearing all these like fine little sounds as well. And one thing that another point I want to say, that these past 3 weeks has been like very difficult for everyone and painful. And most of these amazing students, and like everyone else, they were affected by it. A lot of them, they've been really active on the street for this movement. And kudos to you all. You all worked so amazingly these past 3 weeks. It's beyond. It's for me like such an honor to see the result of all of these things, that the passion and also everything that you went through mentally and like feelings, you put them to your music. Yes. Okay, good. Let's move on.
Hello. So my name is Yibo, and my composition is called The Sea of Magic. So when writing this piece, I was like inspired by if you know that, the blue waves in the Hoya. I saw the waves and it was amazing. So I decided to compose something related to that. So in the piece, you can hear some like very peaceful and beautiful sounds, and that is like my emotion when I see the seas like that. And then since 2020 is a tough year, a very difficult year. There are so many bad things happen. So you can hear in the middle of the piece, the mood just suddenly changed to it sounds like there's a storm happening. But the idea behind this piece is like, yes, there will be storms, there will be bad things, but everything will like calm down. The sea will come again, and like bad things will pass, and that's the beauty of the nature. So that's the idea behind the piece. Hope you enjoy.
Okay, beautiful. So Yibo is not with us at the moment, but if you have comments, please, yeah, please share it with us because you can watch it later. So yes, Nicole.
Yeah, I thought it was beautiful. I got a sense that there was something percolating, and I liked the different pitches that you used at the outset of the piece, and I liked the chords that were kind of created as a result of them. And I also liked how the sounds almost, to my ears, almost sounded like they were getting repitched to kind of coalesce with the original pitches that you opened up with. So there was sort of a unity. I guess I would wonder about your, be interested in knowing your perspective on dynamics, because I felt like there was this certain terraced dynamics feel, like there was a gradual, I guess, leading into the climax, it was getting louder, but then there were certain sections that were very punctuated. But it was sort of terraced in the sense that the general trend was to get louder, but then there were certain outbursts that sort of anticipated that. And I wonder about your thought process in that whole regard. I liked the conclusion too. I thought it kind of left me wondering if the problem got resolved or not. But it's I feel very contemplative as a result of listening to your piece, and I thought it was very beautiful.
Yes, Alex.
I also thought it was really effective in a lot of the same ways that Nicole did. I really appreciate this piece's attentiveness to harmony and to, you know, as Nicole was saying, sort of finding analogs between the synthesized pitches and resulting chords and the sampled sound, which is not easy to do. That's a lot of work, I think, to make those matches sort of happen. And I thought that was really, really nice. I think two thoughts. First is in terms of the space that it sounds like these sounds are in. I guess this goes back to a comment that Alexandra was making with a previous piece about, you know, thinking about what is the implied space with these sounds. Would it be appropriate, for example, to explore options to reverberate the synthesized sounds in some way, so that it sounds like we're hearing those in a space, just like we're hearing the recorded samples from a particular space. The other comment has to do with the ending and you know, the stated goal of sort of implying that the ocean continues. There's just this underlying, unchanging process that's just going to continue. And it doesn't necessarily mean, as Nicole said, that anything's resolved. It's just continuing. And I think that's a really powerful musical idea. And I just wonder if it could have continued for longer at the ending there to really make us feel that simultaneous sense of comfort that something is continuing, and yet sort of unease that things aren't being kind of wrapped up with a bow on top in a sort of traditional sort of way. But overall, congratulations.
Celeste.
Yeah, I was so for Yibo, who's going to watch this in the future. Thank you for a really beautiful experience, and I'm going to very much echo what's been said. But the craft and the meticulousness, the kind of like magnifying glass embroidery that clearly went into making this piece is really charming and really rewarding to listen to. Is it just this piece was kind of short-ish, right? Was it? One loses all track of time. Okay, yeah, and that which is lovely. Like short pieces are magical, and especially when there's like a depth of detail along the way, right? There's sort of a lot that's compressed, and it does seem to me like the short piece. I don't know if Yibo like sort of started off with this project being like, I'm going to write a short piece. I don't know if that was the case, but I feel like the miniature, right, like the little kind of cameo portrait is so much its own genre and kind of has its own laws of gravity in a way in terms of like how form works, and definitely this very alluring quality that both Alex and Nicole alluded to about the piece that sort of doesn't finish, it just kind of ends and slips away. Obviously the small piece that like leaves them wanting more has a lot of potential for that. And so I guess this is something for us all to think about is, you know, once it has transpired, once it has become clear that this piece that you're working on is going to be a short piece, to kind of think about what that means in terms of proportion and form, and how that miniature quality is going to become a part of every part of the piece, if that makes sense, because it does feel like there's huge potential to really make something that's qualitatively different, and as I say, like has different kind of laws of gravity, and relationships with time and that kind of thing.
Yeah, so he wrote me at the piece, and I thought it's like 2 minutes something. It's short, but I think it's really what I wanted to do. And when I listened to it, I was like, sounds beautiful. It's good. It's okay. You don't need to like, because it's not like long as it was supposed to be. You do not need to sacrifice and like your music because of the sake of like the timeline should have been this. Great. Any comments from you guys, colleagues? Alexandria.
I have something really quick, so if anyone has something else to say. I love how, because there's these beating tones that gradually get wider, and then there's an introduction of the sampled sounds. And I feel like how you dealt with pitch information between the sampled sounds, even though like I do agree with Alex, it would be interesting if you maybe played with putting some reverb, or if you're wanting to keep it that kind of sample recording sound, it'd be very intentional. But I love the way that the pitches seem to weave in and out of these things, and it almost sometimes sounded like the beating tones and like these chords were actually supposed to be a part of the sample, and then it all of a sudden kind of expanded and then it goes back in. So I thought that was really powerful in that sense of the feeling of going out and in motion that I guess I think of with the ocean. I don't know. So thank you for that. Very beautiful piece.
Nice. Anyone else? Good. So let's move on. Oh, I wanted to say something if you haven't started. Okay. I don't know if I mentioned that almost like most of the students have never ever worked with electronics. So this was their first ever time trying working with sound and electronics and not like acoustic instruments. And yes, so just to have this feedback. Good. Okay, yes. So Andy is also not here, but our dear member of the jury, please, if you have any comments, share with us. Again, also colleagues, in this class was like one of those classes that we talked the whole time and lots of discussion, and today everyone is like, listen, really not talking. Okay, sorry, Celeste, go ahead.
Oh, I really want, I mean, Andy's not here, so I don't know if anyone else can answer this question, but what is this sound? What am I listening to? Is this ice? Is this whales? Is this...
This is one of the whale sounds.
Undersea vents. It's a whale. Great. Okay. I'm happy. I'm glad.
I mean, there were a collection of a lot of lots of different kinds of mammals, but do you mean the glissando ones? Yeah, that was a whale. No sounds. Yes. Not cool.
You're muted.
You're unmute.
Oh, here we go. Here we go. Sorry, I was into the spirit of the piece, the silence, quietness. All right. So I thought it was really subtle, and I loved how subtle it was. I loved the sweep sounds. You know, I have a penchant for sweeps and risers, so I just liked the sound design in that regard. It reminded me of crickets at some points during the slight modulations. Kind of had this kind of effect, so I got the sense of nature from it, from the slight modulations. And I think, like, I don't know, I like putting a little story in my head when I'm listening to pieces. So for me, it captured this feeling that, like, in the ancillary to like our lives, there's this percolating sense that nature is here and it's hidden, but the loudness of life and the loudness wars that are our lives just sort of overtake the subtle nuance of nature. And even things like, you know, it's sort of the opposite of going into an anechoic chamber. It's like listening to the tinnitus in your ears, or just the really subtle aspects of life. And I really enjoyed listening to it. And I almost felt like I was gaining insight into that realm as it developed, because you kind of gently prodded us in this direction through dynamic growth, where we were more attentive to it. And I liked it. And I also felt this, just similar to the last piece, this sort of ebb and flow that necessarily doesn't have to climax. It could just go on forever. It could just be incidental. And I don't know if there's a strong ending is necessary. It's like it goes as quickly as it comes. And I like that aspect of it, but it's beautiful. I really enjoyed it.
Nice. And from the conversations I had with Andy, I was also one of those who never done this before, and that was one of his intentions, to make this happen, always like this flow. So good. Alexandria.
So Andy, great job, especially, I mean, your first piece with electronics. I hope you continue to work more. I hate to be that person, but I'm going to be that person with this comment. And I'm curious if you maybe, as you have more experience and you gain more experience, try working with fades. It just seems like not all of the transitions were intentional at all times, but maybe I'm wrong. I wish you were here to correct me. But sometimes I felt as if you maybe added some fades to the beginnings and the ends, and maybe elongated some of the fades, and maybe shortened some of the fades. It could have made that smooth effect that you're going for be even smoother. But there were parts where I liked kind of the hard hits into the sounds. I thought it was actually kind of interesting. I loved the space, the feeling of space that you brought in. In fact, all of the pieces I've listened so far have done an incredible job of just really bringing the listener into a certain space. So thank you.
Alex.
Yeah, I really appreciated how much Andy was, careful about limiting the palette of sonic materials for this piece. And it's a really great example of how you can do a lot with a little. I totally, second Alexandria's comment about, as you continue to go further with electronic music, if you do, which I hope you do, being sensitive to these cuts that sometimes happen and that maybe aren't entirely intended, but it's completely understandable that they're there. I think also there's like an analogous or related, at least, question there about phrasing, right? The phrases in this piece are always very, very clear. What phrase starts, phrase ends, and then another phrase starts, and then another phrase ends, usually of roughly the same length every time. And I just wonder if there's any opportunity to overlap phrases, for example. As I was, speaking about with Charles, with his piece, it's not a question of there being anything wrong with it as is. I think it's really effective. It's really subtle. It's really sensitive. It's not a question of right or wrong inherently. It's a question of what if. It's a game of what if. What would happen maybe if I did that? So that might be something to think about if that resonates. But yeah, I really congratulate the subtlety and sensitivity of this piece. And I do also just want to say to all of you who are making a foray into this medium for the first time, it is super impressive what you're doing. And yeah, I'm really struck by what all of you are pulling off with this. So really big congratulations. I'm looking forward to hearing everybody else's pieces.
Yes, so far actually everyone was their first time. Every piece till now, everyone was their first time. Celeste.
Yeah, just to echo how impressive it is, and folks have said this, but how what an essay this project is, and like how much you can do with limited materials, and also how far you can get, and how much extraordinary stuff you can create at an entry level to electronic music, and without much in the way of bells and whistles at all. I think it's important for us all to remember. This Andy's piece reminded me so much of this composition assignment that my composition teacher in undergrad, Eve DeCastro Robinson, gave to my class, as she had given to the class like 10 years before that and in the 10 years since. And the project is to go out into the bush, into the forest, and listen to birds and transcribe birdsong, and then write a piece with what you have transcribed. And now that I know it's a whale, it's not a bird, fine, but there's something about, this, like Alex said, there's something about a glissando, about this kind of downward thing that's just, you just never get sick of it. I don't know, there's a handful of sounds in that category that for whatever reason are just kind of blessed with this what's the word, indestructibility in terms of their allure. And you go out into the bush and you listen to a bird, and they're in a way they're really infuriating to listen to, because you hear it and then you listen to it to hear it again, and it never chirps on cue. You're like, okay, it's probably about to sing again, and it doesn't, and then you kind of give up and stop listening, and then that's when it starts singing. And so the bird is always kind of messing with you and pulling tricks on you. And so I think that a piece like this, which is really a study of kind of a very, so Shangshu used this beautiful word precious, right? This really precious kind of material, is kind of a game. Actually you're playing a game with the person who's listening, and you're always trying to jump them or kind of trick them. And certainly when there is a silence, and that silence is kind of colored and inflected by the way the sound before it has just ended. Is this an anticipatory silence, or is it a chill silence? Is what keeps us on our toes, even though we know that the next thing we're going to hear is a glissando. It's once we've kind of taken care of that side of business, there's the wild card factor that becomes the energy that kind of spins the whole piece together. So I can only encourage Andy to just sort of keep thinking like a gamer almost, and keep thinking in terms of playing a game with your listener and your materials, because that's where the fun begins.
Yes, any other comments? I'll wait, maybe if someone has a comment. You're good? Shall we move on? Okay.
Hello, my name is Donald, and I am the composer for this electronic piece titled Ocean Chorus. I wanted to take the idea of a chorus of whales singing to each other and create a soundscape where the sounds come from the whales, repeat over each other, and layer over each other as if they are singing in harmony and in counterpoint with one another. As you listen to this piece, I hope that it can provide a message of how beautiful nature is and how crucial it is, how crucial of a place it has in our world and ecosystems. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen, and I hope you enjoy.
Okay. So, yes, Alex.
Congratulations, Donald. I think it's a really effective piece in a lot of ways. I think the kind of prompt you gave yourself of using motivic techniques that you might find in a Bach chorale and saying, right, I'm going to have like an SATB arrangement here, and sort of setting that as like a task for yourself to see what does it mean to import that into this different medium, I think was really really clever, and it sounds like it really prompted a lot of creativity from you, and I think that's really great. I think the panning was really effective. I think it was really smart to do the panning on high-pitched sounds, high-frequency sounds, because it's much easier to track panning when the frequencies are high, and so it was very, very effective. It really was like really moving inside my head. So great. The kind of percussive motif that you use, that begins the piece, I think your decision to begin the piece with that and then immediately after move on to something apparently completely different is really interesting, right? For me, in the moment, it had the effect of making me think that this isn't really the beginning of the piece. What's going on here is the composer is sort of saying, hey, listen, the piece is about to begin, get ready. It's almost like a sort of 3, 2, 1, go, this sort of thing. And I think that's a really interesting idea, that the beginning of the piece is not the beginning of the piece, right? And it's something for us to sort of all think about, how can we push that further? The opposite, I think, which is also interesting, would be that the piece begins and it's already in the middle of something that we just didn't hear. Like there's some activity going on in a room and we just walk into the room, and that's the beginning of the piece, right? So very interesting. I think my question to you would be, when that motif comes back, superimposed with other things, what is its function? When does it come back? Why does it come back at those moments? And what effect, if any, does it have on the surrounding material? But overall, really, really nice job, and I think there's a lot of really compelling things here.
Celeste?
I would, hi, thank you, Donald. I would love to hear you talk, and I don't want to put you on the spot, so say as much or as little as you would like. But I also, like Alex, am intrigued by your sort of transposition or like translation of your diligent study of counterpoint in Music 101 and so forth to this piece, especially because you also have so much experience singing in choirs as well. So it's like it's a system of templates that you have both kind of an analytical and a like visceral familiarity with, and I would love to hear like how were you translating those templates, and what in the process what mattered to you? Like what did you find are the behaviors of counterpoint that like really matter to you and that you kind of derive genuine pleasure from, as opposed to like reading it in a book, you know what I mean?
I think to answer your question, one thing that I was kind of thinking about as I was working with this piece was how can I kind of play around with different frequencies from the same sample? So kind of in a technical level, I just took a sample that I really liked from one of the whale sounds, and I tried to equalize the frequencies. So the high parts were really high, and I tried to bring out a lot of the bass in some of the other samples. And so I think what I really liked about just kind of taking that this idea of counterpoint, and I think the imitation part really always stood out to me. It's like when I'm in your class, Celeste, and we're doing warm-ups, we're doing canons in class. I like this idea of starting with the statement, and then all these other parts are coming in with this statement, and it kind of creates this this harmony of sounds. And so that's kind of what I had intended with bringing all these different, bringing the same statement really, but in a different context and layering them on top of each other, which was kind of the kind of a big idea behind this piece. So yeah, I don't know if that answers your question, but yeah.
Yeah. I guess just to follow up, like a thought that I had while I was listening is obviously, you introduce, well, you call this piece a chorale, and so then or at least the puzzle that I was trying to solve as a listener is to sort of find the continuity between voices, right? And in one sense that's organized by frequency, of course, but in a project like this, you have kind of more latitude with how you assign voices than you would when you have like anatomical restraints in a choir. And so that's something that I found interesting to track as a listener, and maybe is something that you might want to take forward into other pieces or contexts in which you are sort of transposing these ideas. Is, there's like a base frequency range, but then is there also a base character or some kind of continuity that allows us to hear a lot of heterogeneous samples and sounds as being somehow unified as a phrase or as continuation between phrases, so that we can track these kind of roles and personalities as the piece goes on. Yeah, that's just something that came to mind. Also, the cha-cha-cha-cha-cha-cha is just so, like, it turns the whole thing into a dance. Like, it's really delightful. It actually reminds me of a piece that I'm going to send you a link to later. But it's very satisfying.
There is a question from the audience also. What software did you work for this piece?
I used Ableton Live for this piece.
Okay, thanks. Alexandria.
So, Dom, I'm going to tell you about a lot of the things that I liked about your piece, and then I'm going to ask you a question if that's okay. I love that you did this. I'm guessing that you panned the rain sounds, and that I thought was really effective, because you panned these rain sounds at moments when you had these low ocean kind of sounds, or like it almost sounded like there was like a motor in the water, or there was like the seals were doing their thing. And so like having this kind of above water element that's panning over your head while you're experiencing this underwater material was kind of fascinating and brought me into kind of an interesting space. So I really, really liked that. I also loved that I could definitely hear the layers, and that you seem to kind of be adding on top of each thing each time. And I know that Celeste talked really brilliantly about this, so I'm not going to go into that too in depth, but I do want to ask you, like, how did you plan on separating the layers? Because it seemed to me like they had different characters each time. Was that what you were going for? And how could you approach it differently?
I think, admittedly, in terms of one thing I was kind of really thinking about was like the entrances of each layer and how could I make that as distinct as possible. I do think that it was a bit too fluid, and I did want it to make it something more where it was like, oh, you could sense that there was this layer, there was this entrance that was coming in. And so I think if I were to do something differently, I would want to kind of see in which ways could I maybe even bring like an attack that kind of that tells the listener like, oh, this is something that, this is a new entrance, this is a new layer on top of this. I definitely think that's something I would wish to improve on. So thank you for that feedback.
No, and this was not even just to ask, this is not even like to say like it wasn't effective or anything, because I thought that it actually really was. But it was interesting how you approached it, because it almost sounded like it was going to go somewhere totally different, but it didn't really get totally different. I don't know if you understand what I'm saying with that, but I thought it was very good. Awesome work, Donald. Thank you for your music.
Thank you.
Cool.
I thought it was really good. I guess I'll add to what everyone else said. I thought the rhythmic intro was very interesting. I do wonder if you can incorporate some sort of whale, like a blowhole sound or something, because there's something whale-like to that, but not as whale-like perhaps as the other sounds. I do agree, like the counterpoint is super interesting. I've never thought about counterpoint in terms of like changing the pitch of an abstract sound. But I think that you can incorporate elements like stretto where you more closely you put the different entrances more closely together, or you have the same material appear in all of the across all the different parts so that it's more a clear canon. But you do get the sense that there's this conversation, which is really interesting. It's not saying that you have to do it that way. It's really beautiful, and I love whenever the baritone wail, if that's a thing, comes in, and it's just really powerful. It's like I wonder if that's the way they're thinking about all this stuff. But yeah, and I also really like the delay. Like there's this change in there's a change in pitch, and it kind of reminded me of the ending of Karma Police by Radiohead, and I wonder if that's how they did it. It's just this kind of. I really appreciated it. It was really beautiful, and I also like what Alex and I can't remember who said what now, but I like the panning through the stereo field, and it's really really beautiful work.
Thank you, Nicole. Thank you.
So someone sent me like, why am I not like giving comments? I've met with them so many times, and we had extensive office hours and talked. So that's why I already like had a lot of conversation with them, and I just wanted to have 4 different amazing people sharing their thoughts with the students. So that's the reason. I just wanted to point out something. All of the pieces, and you all mentioned that. That's really amazing to hear that, and bravo to you all that you made it. So in the whole class with the listening, we were working on what are the creative processes, how to work with the sound, how to understand, identify different qualities of the sounds, and then make a decision as a composer, how to put them together and how to create something from maybe just one little thing that we have. So the less is more was one of our mantras in the class, to like, you don't need to have like 100,000 of things and put all of them together, but you can just have one little thing. But if you start, the craft is where you can work on them, on the details, and see how you can change that thing and create different bring out different qualities of that sound. And everyone, all of you worked in different ways, but everyone achieved every message that I was to like get out of this class. So great. Yes, Jeffrey.
Donald, I just want to say that I really like how you dealt with the pressure variations with each entrance and with how you were using transposition to your advantage. And with the variation in density and pressure, there was this sense that the musical entity is morphing continuously, and that movement just struck me as really beautiful. So thank you for bringing us this piece.
Okay, any more questions? Thoughts? Okay, let's move on.
Hi everyone, I am Zhennuo. I'm currently a 3rd year double major in cognitive and behavioral neuroscience and music, specialized in composition. My piece is called Ocean Jungle, and when I first started to working on it, I absolutely had no idea what I want to do. So I just go listen to all the recordings that the professor gave us, and all of them are recorded under the ocean. I picked up all the interesting sounds to me and put them in a random order. Then I listened to them as a whole thing together. They already sounded so nice and kind of gave me a direction of what to work on, because they kind of sounds like sounds that we hear when we go hiking in the forest. So I made some slight moves and added some effects to them, make the transition smoother. Also, our perfect professor, Anahita, helped me with developing some idea, make my piece more interesting, more creative to listen to, so that the audience of my piece probably find these hints or other hints in my piece if it's possible. So thank you, Anahita, and I just hope you all to enjoy my piece. Thank you.
Nice. Okay. So, comments. I know we need like after so many like beautiful episodes, we need like time to like for our brain and then our ear to like be to like really digest and like formulate our thoughts. Alexandria.
I absolutely love this piece. I'm blown away. And I don't know how you can somehow manage 3 majors at the same time and make this incredible piece. So kudos to you and incredible work. I love that you played with this expanding and contracting of material in the beginning. It was very much in the rhythm of breath, and it kind of brought my body into the entire piece and into the experience right away. And that I thought was extremely effective. And then this is kind of like a similar thing that I loved about Charles's piece is that you use the samples that you were given and how you place them was very much like were maybe instinctually or like placed or done by how they were mic'd. Like some was very close mic'd and some was very far mic'd, and then you like put them in different areas of the mix. And I thought that was really interesting and kind of gave that effect. Like we were in like I know you're calling it like a jungle, kind of like some kind of jungle, like where sounds would be coming from up above me and under me. And I thought that the way that you did that with what seemed to be very little processing to the samples was brilliant. I also love that you had this kind of mid buzz, this like that was like it was kind of like this drone going on under it, so it never quite got silent, but in that way that we had this like something like kind of going on was really kind of an interesting space to be in sonically, like this very machine-like sound that maybe wasn't even made by a machine. It sounded like some of the ice sounds. That was kind of fascinating. I guess I know I keep saying a bunch of stuff, but the fact that you're working in the medium of electronic music and that you took these natural sounds and you interfaced with them in ways that I can imagine like kind of electronic music instruments being interfaced with was very interesting and very effective, but you also let the samples have an autonomy of their own. I don't know why, but I kept on thinking of Flying Lotus while I was listening to it. Love Flying Lotus, so that was exciting. So incredible work. So awesome.
Alex.
I second basically everything that Alexandria just said. I think it was a really effective piece. Congratulations. I'm particularly struck by one of the things that she commented on, which is your attentiveness to closeness and distance through the type of miking that was done on these sounds, and sort of using that as a compositional parameter, I think is a really, really powerful idea. I actually just want to comment on something I heard you say in your introduction, in your video introduction to the piece, which I think is something for us all to sort of bear in mind. You talked about thinking, well, gosh, what am I going to do with this project? I don't know what I'm going to do. And so what you did is you immersed yourself in some material. And what you then did is applied a process to that material. I think you said you just applied a random process to the material. And I think these are really great ideas for us all to kind of keep in our like metaphorical toolkits as composers. In something I said in response to Sebastian's piece, I was talking about like this sort of inherited, like it's hard to get away from sometimes, this 19th century feeling of like what an artist is, what a composer is. And I think, kind of along those lines, we often have this idea of like, oh, well, the composer as the sort of inspired luminary, where the idea is purely internal to you, and it comes from this mysterious inward place. And that's really a myth. And I think that this project and the way that you went about this project really draws our attention to the fact that our ideas come from the world around us, right? And that it is absolutely a viable compositional strategy to explore found material and then to let processes run on that material and respond to the results, respond creatively to the results, and sort of engage with music that way. So I thought that was really really striking, and I think it's a great lesson for us all to bear in mind a way of working with material.
Celeste?
Yeah, congratulations, Zhennuo. And I really want to echo Alex and thank you for being so transparent about how this piece was made, because it made it a joy to listen to, because I realized that basically what you are presenting, the piece that you are presenting us with, is kind of an encapsulation of your own journey through this archival material, right? You know, you're presented with this kind of vast sandbox of the archive, and you, in a metaphorical sense, walk through it, and then we kind of follow in your footsteps in this piece. So it was nice to kind of feel a bit of camaraderie with you, the composer, in that sense. And certainly, again, to really second what Alex said, the strategy of like throwing spaghetti at the wall and seeing what sticks is so valuable, because when you're in that position that you described, and we've all been there, I've been there like yesterday, of like, man, I've got to do this piece and I have no idea. I think I have no ideas, right? Which can be a really daunting, kind of depressing thought. But then you just kind of throw some stuff together, and then by listening to it, you realize you have more ideas than you think you did, right? You have more opinions than you think you did, because immediately you're having to make decisions about, that was cool, that was not so awesome, you know, that other thing was cooler. And so I would love to hear more from you, Zhennuo, if, to the extent that you want to share this, any particular remembrances you have from that process of, you know, when you first hit play, to kind of experience this fairly randomized string of things. How did you know what was really attractive to you? Like, what stuck out? What were the kind of, what piqued your interest, so to speak?
I would say it was at first sounds like waves of sounds, different sounds keep coming into the scene, but at first the transition was really, really bad. I can hear, like, say, it doesn't sound like a walking, it just sounds like, oh, you just jump into a new scene. So I made the transition just more smooth, so that it sounds like you are walking slowly into a new scene instead of just jumping to the new scene. However, this kind of waves of new sounds coming in give me the idea of, oh, I want to do something like new materials coming in instead of just developing an idea, a simple idea. Yeah.
Cool, I appreciate that. That was really interesting. Thanks, Zhennuo.
Nicole?
I thought it was really beautiful, and yeah, I echo the sentiment that everyone before me has said, that it's really cool that you're approaching this cutting edge process just by diving in, because no one's really necessarily explored this concept of an ocean jungle. So you're sort of discovering these things in real time, and it's a very provocative analogy. Like, I felt like, you know, I was thinking about motorboat sounds, and is that like the canopy of the ocean jungle rainforest? Like, and just the idea of like a noise floor in a rainforest. You kind of always hear crickets or whatever insects they have. Well, the variety of insects that they have in a rainforest. But whereas in the ocean jungle, it's actually heavily characterized by silence, and there's this kind of, I like how you have this suddenness of certain kind of super alien sounds, and you, as Alexandria was saying, you kind of use miking, or I also noticed you use time stretching to kind of change the perception of these sounds. I thought that was really cool. I don't know if I heard car sounds, but I wonder if those are like, if whales perceive cars as land whales, who knows? I just thought of all these different strange analogies as a result of this very provocative piece that you wrote. the one I really like, I really like the way you process the sounds. The one comment I would make, it's sort of a very specific thing, is every now and then a noise burst would come in. I wonder if it was intentional. It seems like really front and center in the stereo field. I wonder if that was deliberate, or if it wasn't, you could add some reverb just to sort of place that sound, because it comes in and out quite quickly. But then again, there is that suddenness, like a fish just comes in and grabs the other fish and leaves the scene. So it does work really well as well. And I liked all the fades that you did for all the other sounds. So it's really, really nice stuff. I really enjoyed it.
Juno, do you want to give any comments?
Sure. So that noise was actually the idea from Anahita. I used it for once when I showed it to her, and then she told me, she was like, why not develop that idea? And then I think of it as, say, if it's a dream of you just walking in an ocean jungle, then your dream can be fragmented. You can get disturbed by something else. Then that white noise come in, and then the dream might come back. So after the white noise, you probably dreamed suddenly to another thing, and then the white noise come back again. So the white noise doesn't come in until later in the piece. So it just feels like, oh, you had a complete dream for the first half, and then probably it goes to more fragmented in the later half.
That's really cool. I like that consciousness aspect of it. That's really, really interesting how you're kind of brought into these different aspects of a dream. That's really cool.
Nice. Yeah, but I'm very happy that Juno, I mean, all of them basically used this technique that Alex started mentioning. That was the toolbox that we started from the first day of the class. This is going to be, we are going to learn. So that's the beginning. So I had a conversation with everyone. What do you want to learn this quarter? Like, everything changed. What do you want to do this quarter? And I have some ideas, but I want to hear from you guys. And everyone actually basically said that everyone wants to know, like, how can they have like some tools basically that get them going and like be able to like move forward. And that's why they accepted all these like challenging exercises that I gave them, and every class they came enthusiastically with ideas that I would have never even thought. And it's amazing that you all used every basically this like toolbox into like how to create your own thing with that. Nice, good. Okay, any other comments from the colleagues? I posted one of the comments from the chat here for you, Juno. Awesome. Okay, let's move on.
And good morning. My name is Mint. You can call me Mint. Hope everyone is doing great. So, for this piece, it's something I've been working on since a couple weeks ago, probably 2 or 3 weeks. Just trying to mingle and tweak around different kinds of parameters of the effect that you can do around with the original sample itself, and trying to explore what goes onto the surface and what, more importantly, goes beneath the surface. And yeah, I think I quite like the result, and I hope you like it. Thank you.
Congrats. Great. Okay. Who wants to start? Alex.
I'm having some trouble seeing folks, so I think my connection's a little choppy.
Oh.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
I hear you
All right.
very well.
Yeah. We'll hopefully this will come through. Congratulations. I think it's a really strong piece. The sort of general perception I have of the piece is that there's this kind of steady reservoir of material, and then there's the separate question of how is the material presented, right? Is it allowed to just sort of exist in this almost sort of timeless, continuous stream, or is it sort of molded into these pulses? And I think that's a really, really, really powerful idea that I think can be applied to a lot of music. I would be curious to hear a little bit about how you made this piece, and if you wouldn't mind just sharing with us a few thoughts on some of the on the materials and the processes that you were working with.
Definitely no problem.
I think it's really
Actually, this is the first. I've been like doing weird kind of like sound design for probably like half a year already, but this is the first time that I'm doing this without a beginning idea of what I'm actually doing. And usually, like when I try to design a piece, I already have like a general landscape of like what am I doing, what I'm not want to do. But this time is like because everything happens in such a random manner that I have to just gloss over the piece and think what I can do around it. And regarding the techniques of it, it all basically boils down the idea of grabbing or crop a certain piece or like certain parts of the music and put it into different kinds of effects, because what effects usually does is it distorts the sound and generates random things that you would not necessarily hear, but it just exists in there. And because like the certain effects does certain things, it basically just pops out the hidden elements onto the surface. And I feel like what I was doing is almost like trying to manipulate the iceberg world into something. Now thinking about it, almost like some kind of like cyberpunkish kinds of understanding that the natural world is being affected by the technology we have, and the things that we don't necessarily pay attention to suddenly pops out onto the surface.
Thanks.
Alexandria.
Man, that was super awesome. So great work. I love that you have this idea about the world beneath the sound. And so when you were talking about the piece, I kind of had this expectation in my mind. And then that entrance happened. I was like, whoa, okay. It kind of had that. It seems like you have like some serious Ableton chops with like the resonators, the chorus effects, and like the ping pong delays, and all these kinds of things that kind of turn these sound samples into like a world of their own, like you were saying. And I love that you bring like certain things into certain, I guess, like binaurally, even though I don't know if that was the intention for it to be binaural, but it had this kind of effect, like the sounds were doing a certain thing in this year, and then they were doing a certain thing in this year, and then they pulsed wider and wider and wider towards the ends. And I kind of like that you did these like different transformations of the material, and you kind of like these chorus and like the resonators, I'm not sure quite what you used, but it sounded like that to me. brought out like maybe the artifacts of the sound that would be considered undesirable, like the stuff that would be cut out, but you kind of emphasized them and amplified them into a thing onto themselves that became extra musical and also added a pitch element that was very beautiful and just really interesting. So thank you so much, Mint. I think if I were, and I'm nitpicking here, if I were to give any kind of critique, it would be like, it would be actually, maybe I should frame it in more of a question, like how does a piece feel whether it's ended or not? And like how does that feel, and like how do you want the listener to feel as an ending? But again, that's like super nitpicky. I thought your piece was awesome. Thank you, Mint.
Awesome. Mint, do you want to comment on Alexandria or?
Just first, thank you so much for the compliment. It just really makes me feel happy. And but back to the question, like how does this piece makes people feel? Actually, I probably doesn't really have an answer to that, which is odd, but it just feels like what I'm simply trying to do is presentation. And what, like, back to the question, how do I feel about the piece? I don't really even have an answer to it. It's probably also the way how I generally feel about this potential cyberpunk nature behind this piece. It's, you can see that it's like everything is being distorted, being like things that seems to be unpleasant being amplified into the foreground and being put into the picture. And is that necessarily a good thing, or is that a bad thing? Like I don't really even have an answer, because the moment when I listen to other people's pieces, for example, Joonsik's piece, I feel like there is a stark contrast between his piece and mine. There is a like natural quietness that I'm never able to reach with this piece, and I feel like that kind of stark contrast gives me, and probably gives audience, a way to think about the technological nature of today's world, I assume. So that's, if talking about feel, like that's what I'm trying to express, maybe. But thank you again.
Awesome. I'm just going to stress again, I love this idea of how you deal with the artifacts of like maybe what shouldn't be in the sound, and like the technology itself interrupting the nature, but like bringing it together. Very cool, Mint. Thank you.
Nicole.
Yeah, I really loved it. I had this teacher once tell me, I never really completely understood what he was talking about, but he told me that there's like public sounds, and then there's like private sounds, and then there's like secret sounds, where like you're kind of exposing aspects of yourself in that kind of hierarchy. And I thought you kind of went towards the degree of like exposing this sort of landscape that was like super personal, and it just was, it's like that feeling like right before you're going to sleep, when you have all these ideas, but they're like impossible to kind of categorize and put in a specific modality. And I thought it was really interesting how like certain elements would sort of percolate, like certain dance music elements would sort of percolate to the foreground, and other things would kind of percolate as well, and it would get, like a bass line would appear, and it was really interesting to kind of think of this undercurrent of reality. And it kind of reminded me a little bit of like the Beatles' Revolution #9 a little bit too. And I really like the sound design. I think Alexandria, I saw in the comments, King Britt also wrote about resonators, and it definitely has that kind of quality to it. And I thought it's really cool. Yeah, really inspired and wonderful work.
Awesome. Any other comments? Celeste?
Yeah, I'm just going to chime in and just congratulate you, Mint. I really, there's a lot that I really admire about this piece, and I'm interested to hear about your interest in sound design. Is that sound design for what kind of medium? I'm curious about what your interest is.
if it's about the question like what do I usually do sound design for, it's usually because my major interest is to cinematic music kind of thing. So that's becomes my main interest, and designing things that's like first is like just simply designing like all the kind of stereotypical electronic kinds of sound that you usually hear in cinematic music is something that I've been really working on like for a long time. And around like the moments of my sound design ideas and value changes probably comes from a composer called Mick Gordon. He is he is one of the most famous video game music composer. That video game is called Doom. Like basically he just did all different kinds of crazy things. Like he can just basically turn a simple sine waves into some kind of like horrifying satanic kind of like mechanical sound. And I feel like that was like the moment when I feel like I want to do something like that. I want to like, if I want to do music composition, so that's something I want to do. So that probably like also influenced the way how I make this piece as well.
That's interesting that you speak about admiring this kind of craft of like wizardry and kind of transformation. You know, that a sine wave becomes something truly satanic. Because I definitely, what I really loved following through the piece was how sort of foreground becomes background, and materials sort of become something else while still being very recognizable as what they began with, and things even sort of like come in and out of focus of like musicality. I don't know, like on a spectrum of sort of things that really feel like a track, as opposed to kind of an ambient like glow around the track. But then what was the ambient glow like becomes kind of the rhythmic propulsion of the music and all that. And it was just, yeah, it was just really kind of deft how you led through all that, and really subtle. So it felt like there was a lot of personality in terms of how you dealt with the materials. And so that's why I'm kind of excited about your interest in sound design, because obviously then you are lending personality to like a narrative world or a character, or something that really needs personality to kind of zing. So I hope you can keep finding ways to like hone that craft. And one thing I just wanted to, this is literally like a personal response and nothing more, but that moment where the resonators come in, I think it's like halfway through-ish, that really felt like a moment to me, like almost sort of like a chorus, sort of a moment we'd been waiting for without knowing we were waiting for it, and after which like things became different. Like that was just really hit me as a kind of a structural pillar. That's neither here nor there. I enjoyed it. There just might be interesting sort of listener feedback for you. It's very strange giving feedback so soon after a piece. It's kind of like when like sports journalists like stick a microphone in front of a athlete's face, like when they're still dripping with sweat having just come off the field. It's kind of like I just want to get to the locker room. But yeah, congratulations.
What an analogy.
Yes, someone wanted to say something. Someone started to talk. No? No, I just wanted to say thank you. Also, like one comment to all the people who are watching and joined us. King Britt is here, Rand was here, Barbara is here, and lots of grad students, lots of your friends that I don't know, maybe them, and like some of people from New York are here. So thank you for staying. I know it's a long program, but these are amazing, such talented students, and their work is just awesome. They really achieved to create something of their own, and that's precious. That's yes. So yes, any other comments? Great, then let's move on.
Hi, my name is Milo, and my piece is called Another World. And it sort of came about by when I was initially looking through the folder from which to draw the sounds, I was just struck by sort of how almost unnatural some of those sounds sounded. And I really wanted to kind of lean into that kind of aspect of the sounds and really kind of bring that out. And I went about doing that mostly by using a technique called granular synthesis, which is essentially chopping up a waveform into like constituent little tiny pieces called grains and then stretching those out. And that kind of allowed me to really, like lean into that almost kind of inhuman, bizarre aspect of the sounds. And I hope you enjoy.
Nice. Congrats.
Thank you.
Okay. I know, and before like you said, I know that I'm so sorry that like after this everyone is like this sport that's Celeste analogy. I know how hard is it for me myself, it's really hard to like comment after any concert, even normally if I'm going to tell composers something. It's not easy, and like I know it's been a long concert, so thank you guys. I know I appreciate your feedbacks. So who would like to go first? Alex.
Congratulations. I think it's really a very successful piece. Sounds great. You really clearly have a lot of control over the processing that you're doing to these sounds, and I think you really get a lot of juice out of them. I think one of the things that is really successful about this piece is that it uses space as a formal articulator, right? There was sort of that first moment of what I felt a sort of first moment of arrival, or sort of a first climax relatively early on in the piece. And I think for me, it felt, formally kind of like salient and memorable, not just because it was louder, or just because the texture was thicker, although those things were true, but also because you used more of the stereo field. And I think that's a really great example for us all to keep in mind of when we're working with a medium like this, how much spatialization really can be like allied toward these other things that we typically think about, or maybe not allied, but there's something to consider there as another parameter that you can use to articulate form. I thought, Milo, if you don't mind, I would ask you actually about something that we've talked about with several pieces today, which is the ending, and how you were conceiving of the ending.
I would say that sort of the ending, I was trying to kind of figure out initially, like, what more can I do with this? Like, I just don't want to repeat the same types of processing over and over and over again. And I thought about just kind of taking one of those more acoustic sounds, like one of those more like animalistic sounds, which humans kind of use more like a touch point than, for example, like the ice sounds sound extremely almost like unnatural, but animal noises, like we use that kind of as like reference points. And so what I kind of wanted to do is just like slowly take one of those sounds and make it more and more just alien and kind of inhuman over time. And I did that, I think, at the end using, I think, just like a basic overdrive and some other processing. But yeah, it was more just kind of taking that full, I guess, depth into just that kind of bizarre feeling, I guess.
Yeah, cool. I mean, for what it's worth, well, maybe there was a problem with my YouTube connection. B, not good or bad, like Celeste said, it's just me, running off of the field, dripping with sweat, and offering an experience I had. But I was struck by, to me, the very end of the piece felt, I mean, really the last like 3 seconds, it felt abrupt, but not entirely abrupt. Like there was a bit of, as I heard it, there was a bit of a fade on the sound. It did sort of, it seemed like it was going through the motions of sort of ending, like properly ending, rather than just being kind of cut off. And yet I think there was something about the timing that nonetheless felt a little abrupt to me, and was maybe a little bit surprising to me, given how like smooth you are with transforming, like smoothly articulating the form elsewhere in the piece. So again, nothing good or bad, but just an experience I had.
Thank you. Yeah.
Alexandria.
Milo, such great work. I love the fact that you are exploring this idea that 95% of the ocean remains unexplored. Most of us, I guess probably all of us, because we're at UCSD, have seen the ocean, but yet and it looks so huge, and we feel like we see so much of the horizon, but yet there's so much underneath that we don't know, and there's so many species of animals that we don't know. And so that's kind of a cool thing that you're exploring with the material that Scripps is putting out. So awesome. I I'm going to echo a little bit about what Alex was saying about time and space. I love how you use that kind of moving quick and then moving slowly as a method for form. It makes me want to give you a listening list. Like, I was wondering if you've heard like John Zorn's Naked City album.
I haven't, no.
And like the Dirty Projectors work, and also FKA Twigs. I don't know why, but like I just wanted to say, like, can be something interesting to listen to for you. I have a question, actually. What made you choose, I guess, in the form and the material, what sonic information to put in the center? Because a lot of it was panned hard left, hard right, and then you all of a sudden went to the center in the middle of the piece. Was that, I guess, tell me about that.
Do you remember like exactly which part there was? Because there were a couple parts kind of towards the center where I did some stuff with the panning.
I can't see the time because it's YouTube Live, or I guess maybe I just can't see it on my device. But I did notice it was like a couple, 1 or 2 times towards the middle where you explored that.
I think that was, there was one point where I had like an ocean sample, like an ice sample, and I basically just duplicated that sample 3 times and then like was manipulating the panning of all 3 samples at once. I think that was then. And so that was, yeah, that was one area where I wanted to take some material that was a little more, I guess, peaceful and not really necessarily standing out on its own, and then like use the panning to kind of, play with the perception of that kind of ambiance.
So in a sense, were you trying to, I guess, bring the listener into a place that was less alien and more familiar, or a place that was more peaceful and less not stressful? Because I don't feel like the music was stressful. I felt it was very beautiful.
I think I was more trying to give it kind of like a sense of motion, like a sense that you're really kind of moving through. That was more of kind of what the motion was supposed to kind of give the impression of.
Very, very cool. I think that's really all.
Oh, I said thank you.
Yeah, I think that's really all I have to say. I'm having trouble coming up with the criticism. I guess I'm going to say, like everyone else, like, oh my gosh, we're just coming off the field, and the piece was so thought-provoking for me. So thank you so much for that, Milo.
Thank you.
There is a question from King Brit. For the granular effect, what was used as the granulator?
So I used a combination of 2, actually. There was there was one effect that was just like a VST plugin called Mangle, which is essentially like it lets you take the grains and just kind of like play around with like the individual grains one at a time. So I used that for like the very beginning, where it's just sort of like this buildup, and it's just really this one kind of couple milliseconds loop almost. And then for a couple of the other more like time stretchy effects, I just used I'm using FL Studio, and so I used like the default 3D granulizer, I think it's called, and where you just have like control over like grain size and like wave spacing, and like those were really like the main 2 parameters I was kind of modulating over the course of a couple of those individual segments.
It really was something really nice. Felt like a school of fish. So not cool.
Milo, man, I had no idea. This is great. Really, really amazing. I thought the space worked really well, as some people have said, and the grains in the stereo field worked really nicely. I thought the reverb worked really well too. I think like reverb can push a sound back in the mix. So there was all this sort of feeling of front and back, not just left and right, in terms of how it felt. I thought it was really effective. I noticed some of the sounds like, I got the sense of the 95% and 5% that Alexandria mentioned. Like sometimes I heard this unprocessed sound and it felt like it was sort of like in the front, and it was the 5% of the ocean that we were familiar with. But then when you consider like this crazy grain delay put on the sound and all these delays or whatever you put on this thing, it just reminds me of the 95% and the unknown, and it just feels very visceral, and I just simultaneously want to go exploring, and I'm also afraid to go exploring. But it's, yeah, I liked your delay. I think you had some delays on there, and I really enjoyed the granular synthesis, and I liked how rhythmic it was. And I'm just wondering, like, what it seemed like there were times when it got really, you could really hear the rhythms one at a time, and then there were other times where it just sort of became a huge wash. And I was just wondering what your approach to rhythm in the form of the piece was.
I would say it was a lot more kind of experimental. Like I would say like the rhythmic aspects kind of just came about from experimentation more than like me going in with that explicitly in mind. Like I mentioned when I was talking about, like there's the two different kind of like granular sort of techniques I was using, and it was more just like the automation, like with the grain of the wave space, and that kind of gave rise to those. And then once I kind of like noticed that kind of the rhythmic effect, I just decided to kind of like go further with that and see what came of it.
That was really cool, man. It became, I thought it was really cool how the very beginning of the piece was a huge wash, and then it became really intimate when you brought the grains to a sense when you could actually hear each individual one. It just was like, it felt, felt tingles. It was really cool, man. Keep it up.
Thank you.
Celeste.
Yeah, congrats, Milo. This was cool to hear, having sort of got acquainted with this archive over the course of this afternoon through your pieces. And obviously every piece is very distinct. It was, this sort of had such a, as other folks have said, such a depth of spectrum and like this. Congrats for kind of conceiving of that possibility when presented with an archive of material that has a totally different character. It was cool. I'm intrigued by this idea of writing a piece about strangeness, because and I'd be curious to hear some thoughts of yours, because in many ways, like strangeness or the response to something, especially a sound, as being strange, is kind of like the first stop on the bus tour, right? Like that's the first thought or the first response out of the gate, like, well, that's strange. And the quality of strangeness obviously wants you to kind of keep paying attention and like invites you to continue. And so then the question is, well, like, I think Alexandria kind of mentioned this, right? Does the strangeness continue, or does the more time you spend dwelling with this like fascinating, strange thing, does the strangeness turn into something else? So I'm just curious about your very initial kind of knee-jerk responses to this archival material, and to hear a little bit about like what the quality of the strangeness was for you, and sort of how you followed that thread, how you like kept the bus tour going towards that kind of speck of interest.
I would say that like on the first couple of kind of listens of like the material, some of the stuff that really stood out to me that kind of inspired like a lot of the strangeness was like mostly actually the ice sounds, I would say. I guess like I don't really think like initially before listening to this material, I think I was kind of thinking of like the Arctic as being this very kind of barren, kind of muffled by the snow kind of place. But then you hear like these ice sounds with all like these super high harmonics that almost sound like a harp, and it just sounds artificial. And like if someone had like shown me those sounds and like told me like, oh, this is all digitally created, like I would have believed it. And I would say that was the approach I kind of took when dealing with those like this more unnatural ice sounds, like those sounds that were already kind of very strange. And then like when dealing with the more animal sounds, I was kind of thinking of like there's this concept of like the uncanny valley, which is like a concept more with like 3D animation, that type of stuff, where the closer to like human or more recognizable something becomes, like the more that it being just slightly off kind of affects like a human being's kind of psychological response to that. And so if you take something very familiar, like whale song, it's not necessarily that familiar, but you still recognize it like as whale song, and you just like slightly kind of make it a little off, that can oftentimes provoke a much stronger reaction to people than like applying all these crazy like flangers, chorus, phaser, like digital effects that just kind of squash the sound and make it something else. And so I wanted to keep it weird, but not too weird in a sense, like weird, but still faithful to the original material, I guess.
Cool. Thanks for that explanation. That's really interesting.
Nice. Any other comments, thoughts? I just wanted to point out before we go to the last piece that some of the students, their technical understanding of electronics is even way advanced than me. So I enjoyed talking with them about how as a sound material, how like to listen to it as in like kind of orchestra and like working with the sounds and quality of the materials. And that was their geniusness, all of them, to like go and see that the conversations that we had and the talks that we had, how can I make this, or how can I do that? Because I did not know how to do that. I could like just give them feedbacks about what kind of like the result of the sound result could be like interesting, but not how actually to do the thing. So that's really awesome of all of you guys. It's a different kind of like awesome. The ones that they didn't know anything and they did such an amazing work. And for you guys that some part of it you were on your own, but you went like and explored all the conversations that we had. Really great. Okay, and last piece.
Hi, this is Jeffrey, and my piece, Rite of Unraveling. Its idea first began when I was listening to all of these Arctic recordings, and I was hearing a lot of change. I was hearing a lot of instability. I was hearing a lot of turmoil in these sounds of the ice crashing and fissuring against each other. And then there was this aftermath of almost ethereal like screeching noises that the ice were making, and that felt to me as if a prayer responding back to all the violent sounds that happened beforehand. And at that moment the sounds painted for me an imagery of a religious mass, and that was the initial direction of this composition, which essentially is to reenact a religious congregation sonically. But 3 weeks ago, George Floyd was murdered in Minneapolis, and I was seeing all these news about police brutality. I was seeing all these videos of protesters being pushed down to the floor, of tear gas, and I realized in my composition there is a theme of violence, but me personally, I did not know nearly enough about the violence that happens in the world, and I want to take this opportunity and educate myself on the importance of listening to all these violence and understanding what other people are going through, and to eventually have knowledge to take action and do what is right. And so what I did to my composition was I turned it into a meditation of pain. I was using all these layering, all these spatialization to create a sonic meditation environment in which that was uncomfortable, but I want the listener to meditate in it and really listen to all these sounds of violence, and hopefully in that act we can in Christian terms have absolution in all these things and misery that we are seeing. So one additional note, the recording is binaural, so I would recommend the usage of headphones, but yeah, thank you so much for listening, and
Congratulations. Awesome. Okay. Comments. Yes, Alex.
Congratulations, Jeffrey. I think it's a really successful and powerful piece. I think you are really patient with the material and really attentive to the material. And I really appreciate that. I think one of the things that makes the piece really powerful, you know, with such a restrained palette of sounds, a relatively restrained palette of sounds, is that you really, in this really powerful way, sort of play with this question of what are these sounds? What do they mean? What do they equate to? Right? Oftentimes, you know, at least for me, when I'm listening to a purely electronic work that's utilizing what sounds to be like sampled sounds, or even if they're purely synthetic sounds, the mind sort of goes to like, oh, well, what is this? What am I listening to? What am I listening to a recording of? And I think that you create ambiguity in that domain that's really effective. And along those lines, I really, you know, I want to commend you for, as I said to Sebastian, asking questions about how music can engage meaningfully with what's going on in the world. You know, and I really encourage you to continue to ask those questions and think about what that looks like. And I think it's great that you're asking and that you're working on that. Yeah, congratulations. I think the spatialization is really, really strong. It creates a really strong sense of counterpoint at a lot of moments in the piece. I think one suggestion I might just put out there is that I do just slightly wonder if the kind of maneuver of making a sound spin around in a slow circle is just a little bit overused. It's a great compositional move, and you do it really well. You pick good sounds to do it with that we can really track that movement. But I just wonder if maybe using it slightly less actually would be more effective, right? To have slightly fewer sounds that don't seem to be moving like that, so that when one suddenly does, oh my goodness, you know, it's really striking, and this sort of, you know, picture that we're looking at starts to move around us. It could be very effective. It is very effective, but I think it could maybe even be a little bit more. But anyway, long story short, congratulations, great piece.
Yeah, thank you for the comments, and I'll definitely take that into considerations for the pieces I do in the future. Thank you.
Michael.
Yeah, beautiful, really, really amazing. Once again, I really commend you on a very successful piece, and I thought it was really important, and I really like how you're tying it into social justice. I think that's really important. This idea of ICE is violence, and it just brings about all these associations. And, you know, this the word like airstrike has a whole new meaning to me now. It's like I heard this explosiveness and the sirens and getting the wind taken out of you, this crying. It was so convincing, the sound design you did. I honestly don't know if I would necessarily be able to tell that it wasn't actually a scene, like an actual scene where there's devastation, like our current climate. It's hard for me to differentiate the two. So I thought it was really careful, your use of sounds. And I also really like how the dynamic intensity it continues. It's very effective. Like I thought after the first wave, there's a second wave, and it was even more effective. It was even more powerful. Like there's some harmonies that emerged. I was kind of wondering about how you approach that, and I don't know. It just kind of reminded me of this idea that the problems won't go away, just like the glaciers won't stop crumbling until we actually fix and address the problem. And so I guess I am curious about like how you approach the form, like how you approach the builds, and like what harmony we were like really listening to.
For the harmonies and for layering, that was mostly just for me to build density in a way and to build pressure and intensity. That was my main goal in using all these transposed layers on top of each other. I wasn't strictly thinking about the harmonies, but rather I was thinking about the frequency domain and how much stuff there can be, like in like how busy the frequency domain can be. Yeah, and for the form, I mostly just followed what was given to me in the Arctic recordings. I was following the musical contours that were already existing in these samples, and I was taking them where I felt that they should go. And that was basically it. But there was also this part where when I first started this piece, there was a distinct structure of a two-part form, like a bigger AB form. It was the Rite of fraction and then the Rite of commingling. So in the Rite of fraction, I really wanted to use a lot of percussive noise. And in the second section, I really wanted to use a lot of smooth noises, and that kind of carried over to the final version as well. But starting from like 2 minutes, that's when I started doing the turn, and I was mostly just following the sounds.
Thank you for that explanation. That's really cool.
Nice, nice. Alexandria.
Jeffrey, oh my gosh. I'm still kind of sitting in that space that you took us all into. I think so much music in all genres has this pain and resilience narrative. And I love that you've taken this class project and kind of taken the time to reflect on the things that are happening in the world right now, and the systematic oppression and the violence, and just how terrible and sad it really is. And I love that you sit in this feeling of pain, and I feel like this when you say, where is it? I wrote it down. Okay, do not cuddle in the comfort of your ego. And then you say to listen, to understand selfless pain and meditate in it. Like, you really took me in there, and I'm finding it a little bit hard to get out. So it made me think. It made me go into this space. It kind of reminds me of like when Pauline Oliveros wants to bring people into a space, or when other types of music want to bring people into a space. And so I really thank you for taking me there and for making that, I keep saying the word space bad, but bringing that kind of place for us to think and meditate on these concepts. And I feel like that slow pan, it was almost hypnotic to me. Like I really like the slow pan. I started closing my eyes to like feel where it was on my head. And then I just started feeling like I was being sunk deeper into this area. And then like all of a sudden the pan just kind of chilled out and the audio was slowed down. Like you stretched the time, it sounded like, on the samples to an almost distorted area. And obviously you added some sort of effect on it. I'm not quite sure what it was, like a reverb or like a dark verb or some kind of thing. And then you slowed down the sample a lot and it just kind of sat there. And I think that I always appreciate it when performers, like when they're playing a piece, or a composer when they're writing a piece, is not afraid to take up space and to just kind of sit in an area long enough to where it's almost like I didn't feel like it was too long at all, but almost like you could be like self-conscious about it. But I feel like it was very brave and very effective and powerful. So thank you, Jeffrey. Oh, wait. I wrote down some feelings I had for the piece. I'm really inspired by King's comments in the YouTube. So I was writing down my feelings as I was hearing it. I don't know why your piece made, well, I do. I just explained it. But just like the affect of pain and like the viscosity of pain, like how pain feels like a slow viscosity, and it just kind of, as it thickens, it widens, and it just kind of stays, and it's very hard to drain and take away. I don't know. That's kind of weird, but that's how I felt in the moment.
Yeah, thank you. That was partially what I was trying to create, but the main thought I had in my head when I was doing these portions of pieces, I was thinking about control and spirituality and really like deep diving into like an area and yeah, something like that. And through gradual change and control that we can really meditate on these things.
Before going to Celeste, there's a question from the chat. I pasted it also here from Marcus Balder. Great work, but building on Alex's comment, I was curious about what space was Jeffrey trying to create and if the space was intended to be fixed or itinerary.
I guess this it's a little bit tricky because when I was composing about like I was using spatialization, but I wasn't using spatialization as a mean to create a physical space, but rather kind of a mental, like spiritual space, I guess. You have these sometimes you get these very big spaces where you kind of zone out and kind of look upon the distance, but you also have these spaces where it's constricted by the density of all the sound materials. So I don't know if that answered the question, but yeah. And also for the moving sound sources, it's more to it's a perceptual psychological thing to for me to add more movement and in a sense more the idea of violence. Yeah, I think that's the best answer I can give right now.
Yes, and the comment that of King Brit that Alexandria also mentioned is really beautiful. I don't know if everyone saw that. Sounds felt like parents crying, wells and gravel, victims crying, rain, souls ascending from dead bodies. Extremely powerful piece. Yeah. Okay. Celeste, I think you had your hand up, no?
Oh yes, but look, we're almost at 6 o'clock, and I know Jessica and Sherry
It's
have to
okay.
clock out, so
Oh.
I can. Jeffrey, why don't we stay on the Zoom call? And yeah, okay. Well, you know what, Jeffrey, let's stay on the Zoom call, and I'll find a way to maybe send you an email. Just to collect some thoughts and yeah.
Okay. Any other questions, comments? Awesome. Thank you, everyone, for being here. The people who are have been stayed the whole 3 hours with us watching. I appreciate it. Congratulations to all of you for your awesome, amazing work in during this such a hard and really strange quarter. But you know that's interesting? What are the odds that we did not know that this is gonna be the circumstances that we work together? And it's sort of, although we were not close, but it was still kind of intimate time together, and we could. It was for me a pleasure, really an honor to be able to sit down with you all and brainstorm and talk about creativity and hearing your ideas and the discussions that we had. So thank you so much. And thank you to our wizard, Jessica. Thank you so much. Thanks, Sherry. Without you guys, this wouldn't have happened. This is like magic come true. Anything that I was wishing to happen, Jessica really made it happen. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Exactly. Thank you so much, my dear friends. Yes, exactly, exactly. And thank you, Alex, Celeste, Alexandria, Nicole, for being here, for your awesome feedbacks, for your time, for everything. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It was amazing. It just shows how great of a mentor and teacher